Hawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the short and amazing catalogue from one of the greatest, most iconic and underrated musicians ever in the history of progressive rock. And he was an important collaborator slash contributor for many legendary bands and iconic artists throughout the 70s all the way up to the early to mid 80s. And he also had an amazing but sadly short lived solo career before completely disappearing from the music scene. And he would make his return to the live stage in 2009, where he would put on several great live performances for several years, but he has now more or less quietly retired from live work and in more recent years has kept a very low profile. But whenever you have a conversation about music or about the history of progressive rock, 9 times out of 10, this guy's name would come up. Whether he was a member of the band, whether he was a special guest, or whether he was a producer, this guy was always there in some shape or form, and he played an important role in many bands' greatest success. And when you hear him play, you know straight away who it is, as he has a very distinct and recognizable sound. And this gentleman, quite frankly, in my opinion, needs no introduction whatsoever. I am talking about, of course, the one and only legendary keyboardist, multi instrumentalist, and vocalist Eddie Jobson. So, ever since bursting onto the scene in the 70s as a young prodigy, Eddie Jobson has played and collaborated with many legendary bands and iconic artists such as Curved Air, Roxy Music. He also contributed to King Crimson's legendary USA live album, where he provided multiple keyboard and violin overdubs. He also played and collaborated with Bryan Ferry, Andy Mackay, Phil Manzanera, Frank Zappa, John Wetton, Bill Bruford, John Entwistle, Ian Anderson, and Jethro Tull, Stickmen, yes, and Marc Bonilla, but sadly, no new material came out of those collaborations. And he has also led his own bands, such as UKZ and the UZ Project, and is best known as a co founder of legendary progressive rock supergroup UK, and has played in every single one of the band's lineups and various different incarnations. Now, Eddie Jobson, for my money, an incredible and very versatile musician and a true multi instrumentalist. He can play piano, he can play keyboards, and he can play electric violin. And he is also an amazing and criminally underrated vocalist. He has got an amazing singing voice, which doesn't really get talked about enough. And the way he is able to shred it up on the electric violin, sometimes you could almost mistake him to sound like a guitar player because of the sound he generates on the electric violin. And on the keyboards, Eddie Jobson can sound like a one man orchestra and can create lots of massive soundscapes and textural different colors. You name it, Eddie Jobson can do it all. And for today's edition, I am going to be discussing Eddie Jobson's short and amazing catalogue of albums, which is a total of 4 recordings, 2 studio albums, 1 double live album, and 1 live box set. And as always, I am going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. Not an easy challenge. While this catalogue is very short, I can honestly tell you there is no bad album in Eddie Jobson's catalogue. There might be one or two that are a little bit better than others, But as I said, when we go through Eddie Jobson's catalogue of albums, you will see just how versatile Eddie Jobson really is. And I've had the great privilege of seeing Eddie Jobson live three times. Once with UK in 2012, once with UK again in 2015, and a rare special one-off semi-acoustic show in 2017 with Marc Bonilla. Eddie Jobson, as impressive as he is in the studio, he's even more impressive live. He's just so good and one of the true legends of the progressive rock genre. And before we continue, I am dedicating this edition to Anthony Ferraro, who is a huge Eddie Jobson fan. Hope you enjoy this one, buddy. And with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. We're going to start with the first album, and this one came out in 1983, and this one is called Zinc, the Green Album. So after the breakup of UK, Eddie Jobson would join Jethro Tull as a touring member for the band's A Tour, and this would eventually lead to Eddie Jobson recording and releasing his first solo effort. And as you'd expect from a super talented musician like Eddie Jobson, Zinc is an absolute prog rock masterpiece. It is remarkably strong, top to bottom. Every song is excellent, no clunkers whatsoever. And at the time of Zinc's release, it came out at a very unique period because at the time, prog rock was more or less buried by critics, and new wave and punk music was all the rage, and a lot of the prog rock bands were hailed as dinosaurs, even though they weren't actually old. But Eddie Jobson snuck in through the back door and put out this masterpiece. And it's very much a progressive rock album. There are some elements of pop and synth pop, but at the same time, this is still a great album. And from my understanding, this album was number one in the charts and actually had a number one single as well. So, not bad for a debut album. And I've always looked at Zinc as one of the many hidden gems in the prog rock genre. A lot of people don't really know about this album, but the ones who do, we can all agree that this album is excellent. And it's very much the Eddie Jobson show. He's got a huge, huge presence, and you can really hear in the music that he was such a dominant part of UK's overall sound. And some of the songs that are featured on this album do sound like UK. They did pop up a couple of these songs on UK's 79 tour, and some of those songs were more or less like work in progress pieces, and they would eventually get properly recorded on this album. So, of course, we've got Eddie Jobson on keyboards and electric violin and lead vocals. And we've also got contributions from Nick Morrock on guitar, Michael Cuneo on guitar, Gary Green on guitar from Gentle Giant, Carrie Sharif on guitar, Jerry Watts on bass, Alon Olikchukik on bass, and Michael Basimanto on drums. So apart from one or two musicians that are well known, most of the musicians on this album are not that well known, but they're all super talented and they all play to the fullest, and everyone is on top form, especially the man himself. And what an album this is. Now, this copy of Zinc I've got here is actually a Japanese edition. And it's got a bonus track, which is Turn It Over, the single edit version. So anyone who's got the Japanese edition of this album with that track, it's quite a rarity. So this album is more or less like a concept album. So it's one big humongous piece with lots of the tracks all going straight into one another, and it's just absolutely incredible. So all the compositions are written and composed by Eddie Jobson. So we got Transporter, which is just more or less like an intro. Then we got Residence, which is just excellence. It's just Eddie Jobson on top form. Unbelievable vocals. You know, as great as Eddie Jobson sounds on the keyboards and violins, his singing voice on this album is just dynamite. He's got a really good singing voice. Then we've got the laid back, easy for you to say, which has got some beautiful acoustic guitar work and some lovely vocals from Jobson. Then we got the prelude, which is like an instrumental piano piece, absolutely gorgeous. And it goes straight into Nostalgia, which is kind of like Jobson's little tribute to Curve Dare's Darrell Way. Lots of gorgeous violin playing with some electronic atmospherics playing in the background. Walking from Pastel is great. Then we got the kick-ass Turn It Over, which is brilliant. Green Face is excellent. Who My Friends, which could have easily been from a UK album, absolutely excellent with some badass guitar playing and some shredding violin work. Then we got Color Code, which sounds like the cousin of Alaska, which is excellent. Listen to Reason is great. Through the Glass is excellent, and Transport 2, which is just more like the epilogue to this album. But overall, excellent stuff. An absolute prog rock masterpiece, and a true showcase for Jobson's composing skills. Just absolutely an incredible album. And the standout tracks for me are Resident, Easy for You to Say, Prelude, Nostalgia, Turn It Over, Green Face, Who My Friends Are, and Listen to Reason. But the whole album is just a masterpiece from top to bottom. So there you have it. Zinc, the Green Album, an absolute Eddie Jobson classic. For my money, Zinc is Eddie Jobson's best work ever, and it's one of the many hidden gems in the progressive rock genre. Absolutely love this one so much. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1985, and this one is called Theme of Secrets. So, Theme of Secrets is a very different album to Zinc. Zinc was very much a progressive rock album with some pop and synth pop tones, but with Theme of Secrets, Eddie Jobson does a completely U turn and puts out an all solo electronic album. So this is just Eddie Jobson on the keyboards and the synclavier. And this was released on legendary electronic band Tangerine Dream's label, Private Music. And this album is very much in the style of Tangerine Dream. It's very haunting, it's very atmospheric, it's very much like a new age album. And at times it's very dark and very brooding, and some of it is quite menacing, especially the kind of sounds that Eddie Jobson cooks up on the synclavier. And there is one sound you will hear quite a lot on this album, and that's the sound of a pinball bouncing. So you will hear that sound quite a lot. And I remember hearing a story about the Japanese audience referring to Theme of Secrets as the ping pong album. I suppose it's a funny name to call it, especially when you hear that sound quite a lot. But this album is not what you call easy listening, but at the same time, it's quite beautiful in some spots. So it's one of those albums you really got to listen to all the way through. And it's a laid back album, you know, whereas Zinc really comes in and packs a mean punch. You don't really get that with Theme of Secrets. As I said, you know, you could mistake this as a Tangerine Dream album, which is, of course, no surprise because it was on the Tangerine Dream label, but it's very good. It's a very good album. And once again, you get to see a different side of Eddie Jobson's composing skills and his versatility. So, all of the compositions are written and composed by Eddie Jobson. Now, this album came out just a little bit after Jobson's brief stint with Yes, which sadly came to nothing really. No new music came out of that collaboration. So Eddie Jobson was back to being a solo artist once again. And all the songs here from top to bottom is just excellent. And like I said at the beginning, there are no bad albums in Eddie Jobson's short catalogue. So we got the first track, Inner Secrets, which is just absolutely beautiful. Spheres of Influence, which is really good. The Sojourn is another great track as well. Ice Festival, which is one of the classic Jobson compositions, really good. And then we got the title track, Famous Secrets, which sounds very similar to the X Files, even though the X Files didn't come out till the 90s, but it's a very good song and very popular as well. Memories of Vienna is a great track as well. Lake Mist is another great track as well. And then we got kind of like the epilogue to this album, Outer Secrets. So that's kind of like working with Inner Secrets. So Inner Secrets is like the prologue and Outer Secrets like the epilogue. But remarkably strong album, very enjoyable, quite scary in some parts, but very good album. Not easy listening from Eddie Jobson, but still great stuff here. And the standout tracks for me are Famous Secrets, Memories of Vienna, Ice Festival, and Inner Secrets and Spheres of Influence. Now, after this album, Jobson contributed 3 tracks on Piano One, and that would be pretty much it. But Famous Secrets, very enjoyable. Not an easy album to find, but if you can find it, highly recommended. If you're into atmospheric electronic style of music, I don't think you can go wrong with this one. It's a very good album. And as I said, if you heard Zinc and you were expecting Zinc 2, you're not going to find it here. But as I said, if you're a fan of Eddie Jobson, I think you'll enjoy this one as well. So there you have it. Famous Secrets, Eddie Jobson's last studio album in his entire career, but different from him, very different. So you're not going to really expect anything bombastic like you would hear on Alaska or Danger Money, but a very good album nonetheless. So it's not a prog album, it's total opposite to what you might expect, but still good stuff. So there you have it. Famous Secrets, highly enjoyable and not for the faint-hearted. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2015, and it's a live box set, 2 CDs and 2 DVDs, and it's a special live concert that took place in Japan, and this one is called 4 Decades Special Concert. So, 4 Decades is a special live performance from Eddie Jobson that chronicles Eddie Jobson's career. So, this is kind of like a retrospective, and it features some very special guests. So, we got the lovely Sonny Christina from Curved Air, Eddie Jobson's bandmate and writing partner John Wetton from UK, and Eddie Jobson's bandmates from UKZ, Aaron Liepers. And the band, of course, is Eddie Jobson on keyboards, violin, and vocals, Alex Mahacek from UKZ on guitar, the amazing Marco Miniman from UKZ on drums, and Rick Fabracci on bass. So, pretty solid cast of all-star musicians. My only issue with the 4 Decades performance, it's fantastic. Musically, it's absolutely excellent. I would have liked to have seen some special guest appearances from some of the guys from Frank Zappa's band. Maybe Patrick O'Hearn or Terry Bozzio, perhaps. Or maybe some of the Roxy Music guys like Bryan Ferry, who I definitely think should have been part of this in some form. Phil Manzanera or Andy Mackay, any of those guys would have been great to see. I just feel that, for a performance that's going to chronicle your career, I feel in some respects it falls a little bit short in terms of the delivery. Not the music. The music is excellent. The playing is just tremendous. Nothing bad to say about that, but just would have liked to have seen maybe a few more people make an appearance. Bear in mind they probably had to think about travel, costs, budget. Maybe some of the guys weren't available. You got to fly them in. I appreciate that, but I would have at least thought maybe one or two guys from either of those acts could have made an appearance. I do think Bryan Ferry should have been part of this because, no disrespect to Aaron Lee, but he's a great singer, but Ferry's Ferry. He's the man. He is Roxy Music. You've got to have him, but I don't know really. Just feel like maybe this was a little bit of a letdown. But musically and the playing, you can't knock it. It's just excellent stuff. So I'm just going to have a little quick look here. So there's all the songs, and there's some notes from Jobson. So pretty much it's got a bit of everything. So we've got some Curved Air material, we've got some UK material, we've got some Zinc material, which is quite cool because I don't believe Jobson ever toured Zinc, not that I know of anyway. And we've got some FEMA Secrets material. We've even got some UKZ material, and we've got a Bruford track as well. That's pretty cool. So what we've got here is a little breakdown about each track, which is quite cool. And there's all of the musicians that were part of the show. And more about each track. And all the song credits as well. So we've got the intro by Jobson, Armin by Jobson, It Happened Today from Curved Air, UHF from Curved Air, Elfin Boy from Curved Air, Metamorphosis from Curved Air, Out of the Blue from Roxy Music, which has got one of the greatest Jobson violin solos you will ever hear, Laugh Her from Frank Zappa, and then we go straight into the UK portion of the show. Presto Vivace, then we've got the whole In the Dead of Night suite, In the Dead of Night, By the Light of Day, Presto Vivace and Reprise, Rendezvous 602, Carrying No Cross from Danger Money, Alaska from the first UK album. Then we got Resident from Zinc, which has got a great vocal performance from Jobson. Who My Friends, excellent. Prelude and Nostalgia, also from Zinc, absolutely gorgeous tracks. And then we go into the FEMA Secrets portion of the show, Nostalgia, which is great. Spheres of Influence and Inner Secrets are great. And then we go straight into, which is probably my favourite part of the show, the UKZ portion of the show. We've got Radiation, which is just a badass track. Houston is lovely. TU95, it's a little bit short here. I like the EP version. It's just really hard hitting. And then we've got Through the Glass, which is great. Young Mother from Curved Air. And then we got the two encores, Caesar's Palace Boost from Danger Money and Forever Until Sunday from Bruford's second solo album. Absolutely excellent stuff. What more can you say, really? It's all good. Standout tracks for me are In the Dead of Night, By the Light of Day, Presto Vivace and Reprise. Rendezvous 602, Resident, Who My Friends, Nostalgia, Spheres of Influence, Radiation, TU95, and Forever Until Sunday. But great live set, great live performance, excellent production, great performances, you name it, it's all there. But as I said, my only issue with it is I would have liked to have seen maybe an appearance from a couple of the guys from Roxy Music and maybe one or two Zappa men. But we can't always get what we want, but this was still very enjoyable. So there you have it. 4 decades special concert. Bit rare now. It's a bit out of print, but if you can find a copy, highly recommended. Tremendous stuff. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2020, and it's a double live album, and this one is called Live. So Live is a double compilation album that compiles various live performances from Eddie Jobson's UZ project tour, and it features various live performances from Poland, Russia, Japan, and the US, and it features a who's who of all styles of music. So we've got the legendary Simon Phillips, the Stickman himself, Tony Levin from Stickman and King Crimson, Marco Miniman and Alex Mahacek from UK and UKZ, the incredible Greg Howe, longtime Keith Emerson collaborator Marc Bonilla, Trey Gunn from UKZ and King Crimson, Mike Mangini from Dream Theater, TJ Helmerich, Rick Farabracci, and Billy Sheehan from Mr. Big, Sons of Apollo, the Winery Dogs, and many other great bands. And of course, last but certainly not least, Eddie Jobson's bandmate and partner from UK, the legendary John Wetton. So, pretty impressive cast of musicians here. So, the UZ project was like a covers band that would feature different guests and different musicians who would come in for one show, maybe one tour, and it would feature various different lineups. And the UZ project would play lots of material from King Crimson, from UK, even dabbled in some Mother History material, and even played some ELP material as well. So this was pretty much open season. These guys could just pretty much play anything they wanted, and it was excellent. So it was more or less like paying tribute to the prog rock genre. So it was fantastic. So let's have a quick look. Great shot there of the guys playing. So let's have a quick look. So there is the tracks, and there's both discs. So there is tracks of each musician that plays on them. So we've got John Wetton and Marco Miniman, Tony Levin and Alex Mahacek, Marc Bonilla and Mike Mangini. Great shot of the performance there going on. Greg Howe and Rick Farabracci, Billy Sheehan and TJ Helmerich, Trey Gunn and Simon Phillips, and of course the man himself, Eddie Jobson. So some pretty cool stuff there. So on disc 1, we've got Alaska with Greg Howe, Rick Farabracci, and Marco Miniman, which is an excellent opener. And then we've got The Only Thing She Needs, which features Marc Bonilla on vocals and guitar, TJ Helmerich on guitar, Billy Sheehan on bass, and two drummers, Marco Miniman and Mike Mangini. That's insane. Can't imagine the noise with that. Then we got The Awakening by Mother History Orchestra. So we got Greg Howe, Trey Gunn, Simon Phillips, and Marco Miniman. Yay, yay, yay. That's mental. And then we got Nevermore, which of course is a UK composition with John Wetton, Alex Mahachek, and Marco Miniman. And they got one of the greatest UK songs of all time, Rendezvous 602, performed as a three piece with Marco Miniman on drums. And we've got Ice Festival from Theme of Secrets with Eddie Jobson on the Philharmonic Hall pipe organ. And then we've got Theme of Secrets and Prelude. And they've got the Presto piano with Eddie Jobson on piano and Mangini and Miniman. Oh my god. And then straight into In the Dead of Night, which is the whole In the Dead of Night its entirety with Jobson, Wetton, Mahachek, and Miniman. And then on disc two, we got Bitches Crystal with Marc Bonilla, Billy Sheehan, and both Mangini and Miniman. And then we got a violin and stick duo by Tony Levin and Eddie Jobson, which is really cool. Which goes straight into Red, which features Jobson playing the fret parts on his electric violin. Absolutely excellent. Then we've got Carrying No Cross with Jobson, Wetton, and Miniman. And then we've got a King Crimson track, Starless, with the same lineup, Jobson, Wetton, Mahachek, and Miniman. And then we've got Caesar's Palace Blues, which features John Wetton and Aaron Liepert together. That's pretty cool. And then we got Forever Until Sunday, which is a Bruford track with Alex Mahachek, Rick Farabracci, and Marco Miniman. Excellent stuff here. Very, very enjoyable. Great choice of songs as well. Standout tracks for me on disc one are Alaska, Nevermore, Rendezvous 602, Ice Festival, Theme of Secrets, Prelude, and the entire In the Dead of Night suite. And standouts for me on disc two is Violin Stick Duo, Red, Carrying No Cross, Starless, and Caesar's Palace Blues. But overall, great live compilation. I kind of look at this as the UZ Project Live, but just with bonus tracks. But it's still very enjoyable and great treat to hear all these different musicians and all these different lineups playing all this great material. So can't go wrong really. But two drummers, it's just ridiculous. But still fun to listen to, I guess. But highly recommended. Not an easy one to find, but still worth buying if you're an Eddie Jobson fan. And when you've got UK, King Crimson, Mother Hishnell, and ELP material, and all of these great artists featured, you can't go wrong really, because at the end of the day, it's Eddie Jobson after all. And you know, when it comes to Eddie Jobson, you're going to get the absolute best, and he never lets you down. So there you have it. Live, great compilation of live performances from the UZ Project tour. Tremendous stuff and highly recommended for all fans of progressive rock. Love it. Great live album. So, which Eddie Jobson album do I think is the best one? Well, like I said at the beginning, there are no bad albums in Eddie Jobson's catalogue. Any of these albums could be a number one or an all time favourite. They're all good, they're all excellent. And like I said, you can't go wrong with any of them. Two studio albums, one live box set, and one double live album compilation. And as I said, they're all great. But if I had to choose one, which I think is Eddie Jobson's best album, then I'm definitely going with the debut album, Zinc, the Green Album. I think this is Eddie Jobson's best album ever. It's a real showcase for his playing and his composing skills, and there's no compromising here. This is very much Jobson's show. Unbelievable keyboard playing, great violin playing, and fantastic vocals as well. You name it, it's all there, and it's just an excellent album and one of the many hidden gems in the prog rock genre. You just can't go wrong, and some excellent songs on here. Start to finish, it's remarkably strong. And if this had been the only album Eddie Jobson had put out, then there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just excellent. And even at the time it came out, when prog rock was getting buried by the critics, Eddie Jobson just came out and reminded everyone that prog rock is still very much alive and well. And what can you say more about this masterpiece? It doesn't get any better than Eddie Jobson, Zinc, the Green Album. So there you have it. Zinc, the Green Album, for my money, the best Eddie Jobson album ever, period. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Eddie Jobson album? Is it Zinc, the Green Album, Theme of Secrets, 4 Decades Special Concert, or Live? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal Album Review Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.